Hi, you are watching Procurement and Supply Chain Live, and this next session features Sean Park, Chief Procurement Officer at Splunk, a data platform powering unified security, full stack observability, and limitless custom applications. Sean will tell us more about that in a few minutes. Sean had operations and sales and marketing experience prior to becoming a consultant, focused on procurement and sourcing functions for 18 years before he joined Splunk as CPO in November 2019. His experience is truly global, having lived and worked for extended periods in Europe, South America, and Asia. His focus since joining Splunk has been to design and deliver a highly integrated, scalable service across the sourcing, procurement, accounts payable, and travel and expense functions that he manages. So welcome to the show, Sean.
Thank you very much, Scott. Thank you very much for this opportunity, and I look forward to the discussion and the Q&A session. So with that, the topic for today is talent and retention, and big topics these days, particularly with the great resignation, as some call it. Others call it the great metamorphosis. But changes in the wind, and it's in action. So this is a really relevant topic for this time. So with that, what we'd like to talk a little bit about today for about 20 minutes, and then we'll open up to Q&A, is diversity and inclusion in the workplace, specific to procurement and sourcing. How important are digital skills right now, and how important will they be? What's essential and what's nice to have? Bridging the skills gap. There are gaps that we see in the overall market. I've observed them for about 18 years in consulting, and then, having spoken with colleagues throughout many different industries currently, there are gaps remaining, and they can be filled. Succession planning strategies is really critical, again, given how much attrition we've been seeing, at least in the States, and speaking again with my colleagues internationally as well, and educating the next generation. During the period of COVID, we had so much focus on reacting to a new reality that I think a lot of companies that took kind of a back burner approach to educating that next generation, and figuring out how to best utilize their skills, of which there are many. So with that, why don't we dive in? We'll talk a little bit about Splunk first. So Splunk was founded in 2003. We have over 1,000 patents now. We have customers in well over 130 countries. We are really committed to global impact. We produced our first global impact statement last year. We'll be doing that every year going forward, and we're sincerely committed to having a global impact when it comes to diversity and inclusion, sustainability, and governance topics. The company overall has achieved a 32% ARR growth year over year. That's a software term basically for annual recurring revenue. And in 2021, for our fiscal year, we reported almost $2.7 billion in revenue. So rapidly growing company, but we've also gotten a lot of accolades from Fortune magazine to People magazine to human rights organizations. So we're quite proud of working for this company and the direction we go in when it comes to people. So one of the fundamental taglines or beliefs or mottos at Splunk is that data is the key to achieving better outcomes. And what our data tells us, and we've done tons of research on this, is that organizations with higher diversity and inclusion do better. And so we're tapping into that. We believe it, we're acting on it, perhaps more importantly. So before we jump into diversity and inclusion in more detail, I'd like to describe a little bit about our team. As Scott had mentioned, we have strategic sourcing and supplier management, supplier ESG, which is somewhat a subset of supplier management, a center of excellence that covers all of the groups mentioned here. We have procurement operations, of course. We also have accounts payable, which is, some companies have that underneath the CPO umbrella, others don't. And we have T&E. So just giving you some background on the structure. So when I joined in 2019, the functions were, relatively immature, and that was designed on purpose. The company was really putting its emphasis on growth, like many software companies do. That's not to say that we were not paying attention to supplier risk management, performance management, financial management, et cetera. However, in 2019, a new CFO joined the company and began to focus more on the bottom line impact and how the company was growing, but in a scalable way. So our team got significant investments. We trebled the size of the team since 2019 to today. But the important part here is that we've had an impact far greater than 3x. So while we've trebled, and that sounds like a lot, and a lot of us wish we had that problem, we also have more than delivered. So we're really excited about the output and the outcomes of the team. So speaking more specifically to what we do and what we're trying to achieve, our mission is to accelerate, the overall business velocity. We manage third-party supplier risk and performance management, and of course, look for the best value possible for our business partners. And with that, our motto for our team, the GSM team, as we call ourselves, Global Spend Management, is Velocitas et Valorem, which is from the Latin, which means speed and value. And we try to practice that and live that mantra every day. All right, so why did I bring all of that up? Let's talk about diversity and inclusion. Within our global spend management team, we're extremely diverse. 50% of our women, exactly 50%, believe it or not, are women, and which is wonderful. I'll get to why it's wonderful in a moment. And additionally, approximately 50% of our team is also minority, and that's pretty remarkable. We've been really focusing on that, and the data that I just shared is really interesting because it applies not only to the overall team, but the overall leadership team as well. So I have 4 direct reports, 2 are women, 2 are men. 50% would be considered minority, and the remarkable part of this, though, and I want to ask a question to the crowd, basically, and I'm sure you're wondering too, how did this happen? I would love to be able to tell you that this was all 100% deliberate, and we had targets, and we had massive initiatives to make this happen. The beauty of these data points is that this was 100% organic. We posted for different job descriptions through recruiters and our own talent acquisition team and so forth. We looked for the best talent out there, and this is how it transpired. And of course, we were tracking, how we're doing with diversity and inclusion. But literally, organically, our best talent was found in women and minority representation, and that's the way it should be. So remarkable outcome. The data supports from multiple different avenues in terms of research and so forth, what that brings to the table, which is my next point. What is the impact? I believe that our technology capabilities are, being left there behind. Our people are further ahead than our technology. And part of that is because we're tapping into the resources, the different mindsets, the different approaches from many, many different walks of life, and we get to benefit from all of those. And as a result, we're driving tremendous transformation across the organization in terms of business engagement, supplier engagement, bringing data to decisions and so forth. But our technology has to catch up. And I would attribute I would attribute a significant amount of the success to the diversity of the team. So next topic is about what's really required going forward, what's considered essential in terms of the knowledge base of our teams. Is it essential? Is digital skill a digital skill essential for the future? Simply put, yes. That's clear. At a minimum, one or more of the systems that are out there, whether it's Coupa, Evalua, et cetera, really need to be learned by anybody who's in procurement and sourcing. They have to be proficient in at least one. The skills you learn on one platform are going to be somewhat transferable to others, even though they have different features and so forth. The gist of the platforms is critical in understanding those. Becoming a super user for those types of platforms is, of course, even better. But with, like I say, a decade-long rise of data for procurement and changing stakeholder expectations, we have to have digital skills. Our stakeholders and our partners, our suppliers, really demand that we have these skills at this point. Why? Because they need speed, they need accuracy, and automation and digitization really enable those outcomes. And then finally, data is great. Having digital skills, data manipulation, insights, and so forth is great. But what I coin human enrichment is what's going to be really separating the winners from average performers. And when I say that, it's great if you can get data insights from an AI application, for instance. But the human enrichment part comes into it in the form of action. So AI can't action for you. Of course, it can some tasks and so forth. It can supply some insights into data, for instance, predictive pricing. But in the end, what you do with that data is really up to the humans. And that's where having that digital background, having those digital skills will then enable you to add that human enrichment to the data. Okay. So where are the skills that we look at right now? The gaps that we see are really around financial analysis, around contract analysis, negotiation planning, some of the basics. And it's kind of surprising when I talk to people across the industry, other CPOs and so forth. Of course, some companies have more advanced programs and training programs, and so these skills are readily trained. But when we're looking at the market right now, in particular, when there's a dearth of talent due to over demand, basically, we are seeing this, that it's hard to find people with really advanced financial analysis skills. Understanding the impact of, for instance, different payment term arrangements, being able to build a really solid business case, and so forth. Using data to support decisions. I still see in the market a lot of decisions being made without supporting data. So a lot of things being done by gut feel. And that's a significant gap. As mentioned, we at Splunk are very, very heavily invested in using data to make decisions. And our company, in fact, enables those decisions. There's also what I see as a misalignment of skills versus expectations. Very often I'll hear people say, hey, I really want to do something transformational. And when I ask, what do you mean by transformational? They say, well, maybe not really transformational. Maybe it's something different. Okay. So is it more strategic that you're looking for? Yeah, I think so. But then when we dig into things, they're not really sure what strategic and transformational work really is and what the difference is. And likewise, what's the difference between operational skills and transactional skills? So the misalignment very often comes with a lack of understanding of what's truly transformational and strategic, operational, or transactional. But then what skills do they need to have in place to be able to execute in those functions? Additionally, the application of AI and process mining tools we've seen is lagging a little bit. Some countries or companies, of course, are very advanced in both. But I would say, through talking to different people in the market, that's a gap as well for many companies. Applying consistent SOPs, processes, procedures, policies, et cetera, is another gap. We're trying to standardize as much as possible where it makes sense, but it's a hard road. It's hard to get people, for instance, who are very experienced and they've been doing something one way for a long time to adapt and try to, standardize or move to a standardized model. Additionally, focusing on, reducing complexity is a gap. Complexity kills, as they say. And we see a lot of complexity in the market. I will be the first to admit that we've got a bit too much complexity in our processes and policies, and we're working on that. But that is definitely a gap as well, in my opinion. And then finally, some companies are very advanced in supplier ESG, and they've been on top of this. They were early adopters and early to action. But what I would say is there's an inconsistent approach. It's not quite ingrained in most companies, or let's say 50% of the companies out there, and it's not really happening organically. So these are some of the skill gaps that we see in the market, which brings us to our next topic, which is around succession planning. So I use a tool. It's an Excel-based tool. It's not proprietary or anything. It's something I just developed. But essentially, for each person on the team, particularly for the key people, and guess what? To my team, that means all of you. I have a succession plan in place in case if people were to leave for different reasons, go on maternity leave, whatever it might be. But within that, I have a short-term plan and a long-term plan, and I also have a proactive plan and a reactive plan. And what I mean by that is just because somebody is in a given role right now, it doesn't mean that they are the right fit for that role for the future. So you may need to proactively determine how that person is going to fit into that role and potentially realign that person to a different role. Because the skills are simply changing, and that person may not have that skill or desire to learn that skill. But of course, reactively, there's high attrition in the market right now. I've seen estimates of anywhere globally for procurement organizations. It's somewhere in the 10 to 20% range. Some companies or industries are experiencing much higher rates. So we have to be prepared for the reactive succession plans as well. A second key best practice that I work on is looking at candidates. And the way I like to look at it is when I'm looking or evaluating a candidate, I base the decision 75% on the current role description, but I know what that future role is likely going to look like. So when I'm asking questions, it's not only the current job description, but I'm probing for questions about what the future role profile is, and can they meet that profile for the future. So for instance, for spend data, I really want to have in the future somebody who understands AI and being able to apply AI to spend data. Looking at our category profiles, our supplier profiles, our tail spend, et cetera. We don't have that need specifically right now. We've got other needs, but that will be a role in the future. And so when we're looking at candidates and existing talent, we'll take a look and see, do we have the right base right now for not only our immediate need, but for that future need. And then, this kind of is basic, but just a reminder that, cross-training really can prevent short-term gaps as you need to, fill key roles. So I've seen situations in many different companies where there was only one person who knew a given technology or process or reporting structure, whatever it might be. And when that person left, there was a massive gap, and people were scrambling to learn everything that person knew. And that doesn't work. So cross-training, or at least having someone involved, maybe mirroring somebody for a short period of time, such that, if people do leave for whatever reason, then the gap will be smaller and easier to fill. All right. So the next generation, of sourcing and procurement professionals. What do I see as important? Specialization with the ability to adapt and transform their skills, giving them the ability to break glass and innovate and yet remain accountable. That's definitely a key skill there, or a need, let's say, in terms of bringing in new talent and young talent. And then what's really important here is the ability to derive actionable insights from data. And the way I put it is, if you can't do better than AI, then you're really in trouble. And then, as I mentioned before, the human enrichment aspect of things, of data so human enrichment of data versus data enrichment is really, really important. And that's where us humans really add value for, particularly for, very high value transactions, high value initiatives, transformations, et cetera. And then finally, what's most important is internal and external customer sympathy, or empathy, I should say. Being able to relate to your customers is something that we need to teach the new generation. And their customers are both their suppliers, their colleagues, their internal customers, senior management, and other organizations in some cases, industry organizations. And understanding the voice of the customer, their concerns, and so forth is something that's really key that I do see a gap in right now. And so with that, I would like to thank you, Scott and team, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. And I look forward to any kind of questions.
Thank you, Sean. Really fascinating. And I'm sure your team are going to be delighted to hear you've got a succession plan for them all as well. Now, when it comes to attracting talent to your sourcing team, what qualities beyond the qualifications are you looking for?
Yes, good question. So one of the top qualifications that I look for is around empathy. And what I mean by that is I really do not want to hire people from the old mold of we need to beat down our suppliers. I want, when we're interviewing people, for us to evaluate whether this person will treat suppliers with respect, but at the same time hold them accountable and so forth, but see the suppliers as extensions of our own team and our own success and our own outcomes. That adversarial model simply doesn't work, except for in a couple of very old industries that aren't profitable. It certainly doesn't apply to the software industry.
Yeah. No, that's a really good point. It's interesting, isn't it? Because I know when we are hiring as well, we definitely look beyond the qualifications, and it's hard to put your finger on what actually makes the ideal candidate, or maybe there is no such thing as an ideal candidate. But I always look beyond the qualifications as well. So let's talk about the talent that you've clearly got in your team. What are you doing to make sure that you retain those?
Well, someone put it very eloquently one day. I heard a quote recently, and I thought, wow, that's exactly what we're trying to capture. And that quote is something to the effect of, we want people to do interesting work and do it in an interesting way. Doing interesting work is one thing, but to do it in a creative fashion, to do something where adding that human enrichment, that's what we're trying to do. To be honest, our team is hungry for that. We're early, well, let's say midway through our transformation. And I see them, they're hungry for that type of model. And right now we're having trouble delivering it because our people are ahead of our technology. That will soon be rectified. We have a great advancement coming over the next couple of quarters in our technological capabilities, and that's going to allow the rest of the team to really roll. The second part of that is we have a formal collaboration process. So amongst all of those teams that within the global spend management team that I mentioned earlier, we've just implemented a very formal collaboration process to get everybody working together. And the way I put it is, a lot of times when teams are siloed, you can picture those teams as one side of a cube. Well, when you roll a cube, it goes kind of slow, it goes sideways, it goes forwards, backwards, all over the place, and then stops pretty quickly. That collaboration allows you to smooth out the edges or the corners and become more of a sphere. And everybody knows a ball rolls a lot faster and a lot farther when you don't have those friction points.
Yeah, that's a really good analogy, actually. I haven't heard that before. But yeah, I like what you did there. Obviously, when it comes to attracting talent in international markets, how do you go about that, or what are the extra difficulties of doing that?
Yeah, we are right now. My team is 100% US based, and we need to change that. We had to get the quote unquote mothership right first, and now we're ready to expand internationally and serve our international business partners in a better way. To do that, we'll of course from afar take a look at resumes and so forth, but also we're reaching out to our internal business partners within finance, within other departments, to recruit from within. We have big teams in international markets, and we're beginning to excuse me, get some interest in joining our team. And luckily, there are a lot of job transfers within Splunk. It's encouraged. And so that's one way of doing it. And then I'll also be going to Europe and APAC over the next 10 months. I do feel like even, in the age of Zoom and so forth, that human interaction is going to pay off. Direct, face-to-face communication. So I've had situations where I've spoken with candidates from other markets, and via Zoom, I feel like because of the limitations of Zoom and other video technologies, that you miss things, and we may have missed a good candidate, and we may have likewise made decisions on candidates that maybe we would have done differently. So that's another important point there.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely understand what you're saying. I mean, obviously, we're conducting this call over a video platform, as you said, and people won't know this by watching it, but we've had some significant challenges in getting to this point of this recording.
Very true.
You're absolutely right. I think that face-to-face interaction, as people here at the event, realize, with it being a hybrid event, that face-to-face element can be so powerful. And whether that's networking, or whether it's actually trying to acquire talent. Look, Sean, we're going to have to leave it there, unfortunately, because we're almost out of time. But I just want to say thank you very much for your presentation and for taking the time to share your insights with us today.
And thank you very much, Scott. Really appreciate this opportunity.
Okay, great session there from Sean. And stay tuned. We'll be right back with the next session in about a minute or so.